Q&A options that were sent, Q&A questions that were sent throughout the week. And I want to use this time to kind of go through this live. And if you have any questions, go ahead and drop those in the chat. And then we can address those as those come up. So let's go through it. So I went ahead and captured some questions. So the first one we're going to try to tackle is there a way to restrict tabs when someone else needs access? So let's take a closer look at that and see. So if you go to, let's just go to this parking request that we have here. And this is the parking spot request we've been working on. And let's just say, for example, we want to lock down this next button for only those that are, admins or something like that. It's probably not a really good real case scenario, but I think it's going to get the concept down on how do you lock current users out. So let's just go to customize form. And then within here, this is going to bring up the list. And then while that's loading, what I do want to do is start to authenticate with a different user so we can see what the difference will be and how, based on the user, we can either hide or show that button. So let me log in with the Madison test account. Okay, so we have this one primed and ready to go. That's going to be in Edge. So basically, there's actually several ways you can do this. Let's talk about the quick and dirty way. The quick and dirty way, let me zoom in so you can see it. The quick and dirty way is just to, again, we just want to hide, or you can do disable. You can do whatever you want. So let's just do the visibility property. The same logic, it's just a different property. And then what you want to do is just say, take the current user's email address. And that's usually the safest key to use to help distinguish what the user is going the current user is. I think it's an end command. So let me Google search. And all these are, I didn't prep for any of these. So let's see, PowerApps end. So the same way that you'll be figuring this thing out is how I'm going to figure it out. So we start with a Google search to confirm the switch. So not or in, here we go, gallery selected and saved items. All right, so yeah, so you can just use the in. So whatever you want to test and then the series, right? So what we can do, we can say if current users in, then what I would do is just have like a series of email addresses. Right. So this is going to, if the current user email is in this string and it's not, it seems like it's case insensitive based on the search, then show it, or else it's going to be hidden, right? So let's just push this up and see if this works as expected. And so that's one way, the quick and dirty way. The other way would be to create like an approver list, or a list that you have of users, and then you kind of test against that. So now if I go into the same list with my Madison account, let me just search on equipment requests. So if I go into the same list, and I think it was, which one was it? Parking request 2. That's Madison. I haven't done my refreshes or anything like that, so it'd be interesting to see what happens. And of course, this user has things translated. Let's see. Okay. Just trying to figure out hitting the primary color button. All right. So there, for this user, if I do Control F5, the button's hidden for them. And now if I go back to my user where I actually should pass the test, you will see the button there. So let me hit Control F5. So it's the same logic. So that was, again, that's the quick and dirty way. What I can do let me just do Let me do a cheat sheet here. Let's see. Video on approval access from a list. And what I'll do, I'll try to do these probably like 9 o'clock on Tuesdays and Thursdays. How I'll have some detailed walkthroughs on how you can solve this. But in the end, the logic is the same, right? So it's really just testing the current user's email address against a series of either comma delimited list, a collection of users. Hey, Carlos, how are you doing? Against a list, or you can have it from a lookup list or things like that. Okay, so that's going to be that item. All right, so let's. What's the other one? The other one is Joelle. She asked. She was talking about the filtering, the cascading filtering process, right? That we had. So if you look at this list here, this form, I'm going to edit mode. So once they kind of fill this out, one of the things that we put in here was this cascading filtering, right? And I guess Joelle was asking, she was like, well, this seems to work, but you only have a list of 1,200 items. What if you have a list of items that's over 5,000, right? So let's take a look at this. So if I take a look behind the scenes inside contents, you would notice that in the request section, I have, in this request list, I have 147,000, right? And this thing is going to be, again, SharePoint list can handle up to 30 million items. And so the ability, because we're able to, the overrun capacity is 30 million, how do you build solutions when there's over 5,000? And 5,000 is a key number because usually when you start to interact with this list, or you start to change the views, or if you go into the view settings, the list settings for this, you get this threshold warning, right? And this usually scares a lot of people. And from a developer perspective, you have to be very, very careful when you design items against large lists. You actually should be practicing these large list techniques out of the gate, because though your solution, when you originally release it, may only have a handful of items, some of our solutions live forever. Like there's no end date of when they will expire. So over time, those lists can get very large. So how do you handle that? So it's actually a valid question. So in this list, it's I have an item. Let me see if it allows me to filter, because I have to tell you a couple of things you have to do with this list in order to get it to work. So you see that I'm able to filter on this large list. I'm able to group by on this very large list. And this did not happen out of the gate. There's a couple of things you have to do with these large lists. So the first thing you have to do is to ensure that any column that you plan to search against, filter against, or you saw that sample where I group by, regardless if it's in the list view or if it's in PowerApps, you have to come up and make sure that those columns are indexed. That's number one. Now, to do that, you just go here into list settings. Right under all the columns that you have this section here, and then you just click on index columns. And then when you click on index columns, you notice I went ahead prior to this video and index country, because it takes a while. It takes probably like 10 minutes for it to kind of kick in and get indexed in Office 365. And when you click on create index, what it's going to show you is going to show you all the columns that are indexable. So you may actually have columns that live on the list may not appear in this drop down. That means that those columns are not indexed. That was an issue with prior versions of SharePoint. I think for the newer versions, I don't know if that's an issue, but that's one of the things to be aware. If you see a difference between like, wow, I create this column XYZ, I don't see it in the drop down to select it to be indexed, right? So what we're going to do, we're going to go ahead and grab title, because we probably, title is actually the display name. And you see you get this message that says index in process. So if I go back to that list, and let's say I want to filter or sort by title, you see how I get this error. Any column that I try to sort on or group by or filter that's not indexed is going to throw me this error. And unfortunately, it doesn't say why you have the error. it just throws an error. So that's just one of the things to be aware of. So before you interact with this large list, make sure that any column that you want to filter or sort by is indexed. All right, so now let's go ahead and try our cascading. Again, I haven't tried this prior to this video, so I may stumble, I may run into an issue. What? Hold on, my dog's going crazy. Hey. So we may stumble a little bit, but we're going to learn together. And I like doing these raw videos because the mistakes that I take for granted are things that I watch out for when I shoot these videos. If I'm doing this live, I get caught up, and then you kind of see me how I unravel or unwind between those. All right, so here, let's do this. Let's go to our parking spot. Actually, let's just hit the main screen, and let's just add it in a data card, custom data card. And let's just go ahead and edit this field, add a custom data card. And in this custom data card, what we want to do is just get 2 drop-down items added, 2 drop-down controls. So, it's just the same way that we do cascading, right? So we go to the input, you hit drop-down, and then you have, that's going to be our, let's say we want to sort by country, right? So let's just do this DD country. And then for the selected country, it's going to show the user. So let's go here, input, hit the other drop down, and this is going to be the user. And then we just call this DD user. Again, based on the control type, I am doing the prefix because when it comes to formulas, that prefix hints and say this is the type of control you're interacting with. So now I know how to shape my formula or what properties to go after to display like values and things like that. So, that's why I do the prefix on those controls. All right, so now that we have this, let's go ahead and do, let's go view data source. Let's bring in that very large list, the request list. And so that way we can interact with it. So request. I got 2 connections. I don't know why. Going to the equipment site and then hit the request list there. All right. So now that I have that wired up, let's go to country. And this is where I need to go against the request list and bring back a unique value of country. So if I do distinct, and if you see my prior video, you know exactly where I'm going to run into. But we want to go through the motions so that way we can talk about it, how to resolve it. Request dot what's the name of my data source? Request. Okay. Yeah, that's my data source. Oh, it just says returning the table. Okay. So distinct request dot, what's this red squiggly? What's it telling me? Oh, it's expecting, which column I want to make distinct. Country. All right. And then dot results. And that's going to give me a table of unique results. Right. So now if I control F5, okay, it's not going to pop up. So let me save this. Let me go up and push it. Sometimes when you make those types of changes, you won't see it in PowerApps Studio, but if you push it up into SharePoint, you should be able to interact with it on the list. And I'm just butchering these lists, but no problem. We can always reset. So let me do Control F5, and I should be right here on the main page. So if I go edit, wait, where did I put it? Main screen, yep, next, right above the next button. Keep doing these Control F5s to get this thing to pop in. All right. So now if I hit edit, hit the drop down, there is nothing. Why isn't there anything? Interesting. Okay. All right, so let me just go against requests. And then if I do, oops, I don't want to keep showing those previews. If I do country here, will it show me everything? It shows me something, but it's blank. Let's see. Items request the value of country. And country is, yeah, why is this not showing up? Let me try title. Name display name required. This is odd. Why is this? Sorry, I'm running into an issue here. I don't know why. Let's see. If I do last name, I'm expecting, if I select, whatever I select, I'm expecting a drop down of that item. I don't know why I'm running into this issue. Hold on, let's see. It could be a PowerApps Studio issue, or it could be an issue with the drop down itself. Let's see what happens. No, it's not grabbing it for whatever reason. Worst case scenario, I should get, regardless of the size of the list, the worst case scenario I should get. So I'm grabbing them, but they're all empty. They're not showing me any values. Oh, but they could be empty. Never mind. No, I think it's doing what it's supposed to do. Because if I look at this list, no, that's my fault. Sorry. If I look at this list, it will, title is populated for some. Yeah, and that's why I got the display name required. So title is right. But you can see for like my first 100 or so, they're empty. They're actually, the country is blank. All right, so let's do this. Let's do, so this is actually bringing back data. So if I select title, it's going to give me my list. If I hold on the Alt key, that's my list right there. Okay, sorry. All right, so if I do a distinct on this one, I can get the distinct values, but if you saw the issue that I ran into before in the prior video, it will show you that I can only do distinct on the first 500, which doesn't help our case at all, because this is set up. If you go into files and settings and then you take a look at the advanced, if you're not doing a delegated filter, and if you do a Google search on PowerApps delegated functions, you will get a nice page, or probably page and a half, of a detail of explaining what's the difference between delegation and non-delegation functions and features. And basically, what a delegated means that function is going to run this distinct process on SharePoint. A non-delegated function, which I believe distinct is going to try to bring all the data to PowerApps and then do its process in its distinct algorithm against all the data once it's in PowerApps. What that 500 says, it says if you're not using a delegated function and I need to bring all the data to PowerApps for this function to do its algorithm, I'm only going to bring back 500 items, right? So in our case, 147,000 items, that doesn't work. So what we need to do, we actually need to filter, and this is a trick that we used in the prior video. We need to go into another application, and then Excel is probably the best for this, and filter on these columns and to show distinct, right? So if I uncheck this filter here, you want to get a distinct list of columns. And oh man, I can't remember how I did it. How do you get a distinct list of columns? Oh man, I'm gonna have to Google search this one too. I forget the steps. So Excel distinct values. Let's see what we got. Filter unique values, remove duplicates. Okay, so select the remove. So that's under data tools, remove duplicates, right? So if I go to, do I have to highlight it? This filter is still on. Can I clear filter? There we go. And then if I go to data tools, remove duplicate. Where is it? It's data tools here. Oh, it's not highlighted. Let's see. I probably have to dump this into a separate sheet. And then hit remove duplicate. Yep. All right, so here's my distinct list. So now I narrowed that down from 147,000 to this unique list, and then we can sort this to where it's nice in alphabetical order. All right. So once I have this, now I can just grab this, right, and then go into my SharePoint list. And this is the trick that we used before. So where I can grab the country, go to edit this column, change this to a choice column, and then drop this unique value set in that choice column for the country, right? And then save it. See that? See how once you turn on index, certain features and functionality do not work? So ideally, because this was a single line text, I can promote this as a different type. And it's only a handful. Like, you can't go crazy and change all types for every given. But single line, I know I can promote up, because usually this is like the baseline type. But because it's an index column, it says no, you won't be able to do that. So no harm, no foul. So what we do, we take our list, we just come here, add a new column, and then let's call it, it's going to be a choice type, and let's call this country options. And then come in here and paste in my unique list of countries. But in short, you see how I'm doing this, right? So I'm using Excel, grabbing a distinct list of value of countries, bringing that in, so that way I can, from my first drop down, I can have my list of distinct options. So once that's done, I can come up here. Let me refresh my data source so that new column will pop up, and there should be available to me now. And now if I go to this list, all I want to do is to grab requests. So I can do choices off of that column. So there's a choices method. And then you do request dot, and then the name of the column. And country options. And that's going to populate that. So actually here, without too much work, I should now have my unique list of countries, because I'm just grabbing the choice options from that choice column. So once I have that selected, now I want to say, okay, give me all the users that are in this country, right? And so to do that, I go down to this user drop down, and then just put in my filter. So I do the filter, filter function, and the source is going to be requests. The logic is going to be where the country column equals the selected country. So dd country dot selected dot text, and then return that. And then once I return that, I only want to see the let's say title, which is in our case the display name of the user. Okay. Country. It doesn't like this. Say selected dot value. There we go. All right. So then that's working. So now if I go here, I select Australia. I guess I don't have anyone from Australia. Andorra. Maybe it's taken a while. So let me do this. Let me push this up to SharePoint. And so while this is getting pushed up, the key piece though, when we were talking about index columns, is to make sure that this column here that you're doing your filter test against is indexed. And I think that's the magic right there. And once you've done that, then this should work as expected. Now, performance may be interesting, right? Because I'm not sure how this is going to perform. Because it's really going to be dependent on how many users do I actually have in that country. So if I have more than 500 for that country, then I may run into an issue. So Argentina. That's interesting. I should definitely have more than I feel that I'm getting back per country. But we can test this against, right? And this is where you want to validate and ensure that you're getting what you expect. So now if I go to the master list and filter on a country, so let's just say Egypt, hit OK, I'm expecting these people here, right? So now if I go and select Egypt, I should get a handful, right? There we go. Yeah, see, I'm not getting anything, which is interesting. Let me test against this list here. So if I filter by Egypt, now if this comes up empty, then I'm good. It's just a data issue. I didn't get, for some odd reason, I must not have received all of the data from the Excel list. And that seems to be the case because I don't even see Egypt as an option. All right, so let me select something like, let me do Indonesia. All right, so if I select Indonesia, it looks like I should get a handful. So if I go back to my request list, Indonesia. There we go. Okay, I feel a little bit better about it. And you can filter this by, or sort these by alpha and all this other good stuff. But the key thing is it's going to be indexing the column that you're filtering on, and then also make sure that the result set, like once you do your filter, if it's more than 500, you're not going to get anything past 501 unless you start, tweaking with this setting here under File Settings and start tweaking with this. Like you can change this. Like I can change this to 1,000, right? But I would recommend probably try to stay under 2,000. That's my gut, right? But it really depends on how many of these that you have on your form, right? How many cascading drop downs to where this number may impact performance, because that's going to be the down part, is that you're going to be impacted through performance by changing that number. But so far in our case, so now I have a data issue where I really need to get all the Excel files over, the cell data over into that SharePoint list. So, and I'll show you how I walk through that with Power Automate. So let me do video on Power Automate, moving data from Excel to SP list. All right, so I got that noted. I'll shoot a video on that. So Tuesdays and Thursdays, 9 a.m. Eastern time is when I would do those. All right, so will this work with mandatory columns? So this is one very good question, and this came off when we were creating our parking lot request form, right? And the way that we have this set up is that if something is required and you go next, we want to make sure that the validation works, right? Now, I thought it was clear. I was trying to be clear, and maybe I wasn't as clear as I should have been. These required fields are actually set in PowerApps. These required fields are not set on the list itself. And the recommendation is not to set the required fields on the list itself. So in that scenario, you saw that badge number was set to required. That's just because badge number in that form is first, and it will always, it was required out of the gate no matter what, and it happened to be first or whatever. But say for example, if they had to select a parking lot, that was like your first question you want them to select, and they had to make that selection before moving forward with the validation check. I will actually remove the validation on here, and understand that every time you fire up a SharePoint list, you're going to get this that title field, and that's what this is. This is just a title field rename. By default, every SharePoint list is going to have minimum the title field, and it's going to be set to required. But you, as you saw, you can turn that off. Now, once you turn it off, like ideally, you want all of these to be off, because when you get to Power Automate and you start to update, like say for example, this parking spot request was submitted, and someone had to approve it, and you had to update the status that it's been approved. Any field that you have required forces a value, and sometimes you're updating values that it just makes that work more tedious, because you have to update values you did not even change, and you just pass it on the previous value and stuff like that. So it's always a good practice to go in where the required field is not set on the list, and you're just doing all your required validation requirements. That's a mouthful. You just do all your required settings on the Power App itself. So you're just selecting the data card, going under advanced, and that's your required. So you can turn this true or false. And because you don't set them on the site column level, this is going to be false by default. So you're going to have to explicitly turn this to true anytime that you need it. And I love this type of control, right? Because as you saw in one of our screens when we did the other option, so if you said special type and the can type that you, or the type that you want is not here, and you select other, as soon as you select other, I got to make this required because you selected other, so you should put in something. Whereas if you don't select other, I don't want, even though that other field is hidden, it shouldn't be required, because if it's required, when you go to submit, your form's going to spit out and say, hey, you have a field that's not populated, a required field that's not populated. It's more encrypted message, but that's what it means. And that's because you have a hidden field with the required set, because you wanted to say, just in case they select required, I need this required. So now if you look at this required here, if you look at the required property here on the data card, it's conditional. It's conditional that says only make this required if they selected other. That's what this formula says. So yeah, so to that question, you do not want to set required on the column itself. All right, so this one, multi-step product is, will this work with mandatory columns? Oh no, that's me responding to that. Okay, what's this one? I'm assuming you wrote the formula properly that if the user tries to move to the next page while completing the mandatory fields, they will not be able to save. Is this the same as mandatory columns? Same question. All right, Carlos, track this product design validation, wondering if you could explain a bit how to insert a picture. Okay, cool. Let's say, can you hide the next button? Let's say, Carlos, you got, oh, okay. Hey man, how you doing? So, sorry about that. I didn't realize the audio was echoey. Okay. Sorry about that. All right, I'll fix that. I don't want to waste your time with fixing this. So, for can you hide the next button? So let me tackle this one first. So, with this one, I will highly recommend using a SharePoint list versus an Excel file, because I think the SharePoint list is just going to be more robust. And you saw how we had the index columns and things like that when you get into very large items. And then also with Excel files, they kind of blend in with other documents. So someone could accidentally move it, rename it, or delete it, and then your whole solution kind of go down the tubes in that scenario. So that piece right there, I would highly recommend using the SharePoint list versus Excel. Now back to your other question though. How can you upload photos that you take in pictures with your device and then store that in SharePoint? And then once you display those items, how can you make sure it's performant? So where you have high performance. That's actually a pretty loaded question. And what I would do though, I would dedicate Tuesday's video to that solution. Because one of the things I'm gonna have to do a lot of prep with setting my device up, creating because it sounds like in that scenario what you're doing, you're creating a Power App Canvas app versus a custom form. So let me get a sample camera photo save to SP library, and that's what you're gonna do. You're gonna save that to a library, probably a photo library or a picture library, and then display photos in a gallery within PowerApps. Ensure performance. All right. And I think what you're running into, because those images are so large that you're bringing all those heavy images, especially if you take them with your device. I mean, those images come off like several meg, right? And because they're high fidelity and these devices take like super crisp and super hi-fi images. So the question is going to be, what's the most efficient way to move those big images from PowerApps to SharePoint and then back from SharePoint to PowerApps? So let me play around with that one, because I think that one's a little bit loaded to do off the cuff. But there's definitely some tricks and tips that we probably can do to optimize those images, especially when they're coming from SharePoint to PowerApps. So I'll shoot a separate video on that one. Okay, so you had another question in the chat though. So this one was the can you hide the next button and make it conditional to a previous question? Yeah, you can do that. So say for example, let's say let's just make it up. Let's say if the badge number is is less than a certain number, right? So what I want to do, put this in. Hold on, I got to put something in the passive validation check. So what I want to do is, say for example, you can select your parking lot, but this is going to turn into a save button because based on your badge number, you're I don't know. It's hard to make up the logic, but you just say like based on the badge number, we want to change this to, instead of next, save or disable it or whatever the case may be. So here to disable it, you can go to display mode, and I'm just picking on this property. You can do the same logic on the visible property. And from here, let's just say badge number. Let me go back to the previous screen. Is here. So this is going to be so if you look at the data card here, this data value is where the badge number is stored. And what you want to do is just text, v badge number. And this is my naming convention. So anytime I'm dealing with a value, I put a V in front of it as a prefix, and then the name of the property that I'm doing the value. So that way when I'm on the next screen, and these values, these properties are global to all of your screens. So it doesn't matter if you have 20 screens, or if you have a form in screen main one, and you need to reference that form value in the last screen in your series, these values are going to be available to you regardless of the screen that you're on. So now in the next, what I can do, I can now say if the badge number, right, dot text is less than, let's say 30,000, right? So if their badge series is less than 30,000, then I'm going to disable display mode. I'm going to disable this button, else display mode edit, which is meaning that they can click it, right? So, and you see, because I'm doing this condition test against a number, I actually need to convert this text into an actual value. So that condition can test, and that's just the value method there, right? So now if so you see that it's disabled now because for whatever reason it thinks that this number is less than 30,000, and in this case it is. Hold on, I can probably preview this. Nope, I can't preview because I have to push this up to SharePoint. Hold on, let me push this up real quick. So if I push this up, we can play around with it. But yeah, in essence, the key thing is to one to identify where the value is actually stored for the property that you want to test against. And then when you do your conditional check, just make sure that you're using the right data type. So if it's a string, or if it's a number, in the case that we were playing with, make sure that, you convert that string to a number, and it's going to do what it needs to do. All right. So here, let me do a couple of refresh. And this is probably the most tedious, annoying part of anything else. Because sometimes if you're working on something that's complex, and if you're not sure you're dealing with the latest and greatest, you kind of get sidetracked because you think it's not working. In the end, it could have been working all along. All right. So here, I put in 42, so that's more than 30,000. But now if I put in like a number like this, you see how it's disabled. But if I put in a large number, you see how it's enabled, right? So in short, that's how you can do it. So yeah, you can take any of those previous values or values that you put in and make your next buttons conditional. All right. Let's see what we can do one more before we wrap today. Let's say super interesting. All right, thanks Carlos, man, I appreciate you. Nakia, let's see, been watching videos. Thank you. Multiple approvers on the form. Okay, so this is the question. I really need to speak with Nakia to understand like what's needed. But as far as multiple approvers on the form, this is mostly going to be a PowerApp thing. So let me just add that to my list of videos to shoot for next week. Power Automate. I'm sorry, it's going to be a flow thing. So Power Automate sample of multiple approvers. And we can do that. And when you do this, you can do this as a sequential, or parallel. And I'm a horrible speller. Okay, I think that's how you spell it. No matter, I'm gonna run it through Word and it's gonna get me right. But yeah, so I do a video on that. But yeah, you're right. I mean, when it comes to several approvers, because the scenario could be that based on certain conditions or certain types, right? So based on the charger that's needed, like if you need a Tesla charger, maybe there's another group that manage the charging parking spots that need to approve it. And then once they approve it, then maybe you have the person that managed the parking lot needs to approve it, or vice versa. That's an example of sequential. So parking lot have to approve it first, and then once the parking lot group approves it, then the charging overview or management group has to approve it, and then you kind of get your badge or whatever. So that's a sequential. Parallel would be where you just send it to both the parking lot and the charging group. And if one denies, then then there's some business logic like, okay, well, if the parking lot people says no, then the whole request goes regardless of what the charging people says. But if the charging people say yes and the parking people says yes, then it's approved or whatever the case may be. Or if the charging people deny it and the parking people says yes, then the request probably it doesn't get denied, but it goes back to the requester and say, we don't have a charging spot available. Do you want another space or something like that? So I would do an example of that and have that shot for the video. Let me see if there's another quick low-hanging one I can cover. All right, awesome. Thanks, Carlos. I appreciate it. Have a great weekend. Yeah, I'll be back on Tuesday. Let me see if there's anything else. Let me see. I'm looking for a copy of SharePoint Forms. Oh, this is one that would get you caught up all the time. Because what's going to happen is that when you're doing a custom form, unfortunately, there is no way to copy this. There is no way to copy this. The best thing that we can do, and I'm going to show you a few tips and tricks on how I kind of leveraged this in the past. The best thing you can do is to, Microsoft needs to do something, because most of the time you're creating and modifying the one that's in production, but you're going to do it off hours or over the weekend or something like that, which is definitely not ideal. It would be great if that, we can be working on this parking lot request and like in a different site collection that we call dev. And then once those are done, push those up to production at a certain time. That's really an on-premise model, because in the cloud, you really don't have those separate tenants that say, this is my dev tenant, this is my QA tenant, this is my production tenant. Ideally, at most organizations, even the very large ones, are going to have one tenant, but they may have a set of site collections in the production in that one tenant that's non-prod, to where you can play. So usually, for clients, you can build like sandbox area, and then you name those site collections as sandbox or whatever. But in short, there's really no easy, clean way to copy these. But the one thing you can do, because if you're looking at these lists, right, some of these lists are large, and you can see that I have many instances of it. One of the things that I do, and I love this new feature, is that you go to new and you do from existing. And what this is going to do, this is just going to allow you to create a new list. So let me just call this inventory 10. So it's going to allow you to create a new list based off of an existing one. And unfortunately, as of right now, it does not bring over the custom form. So if I go new here, it's going to default to the empty form or the default form. But at least it saves me a step to where I don't have to go and recreate all of those site columns, which kind of saves me. Excuse me. Yeah, so that kind of saves me in that sense. The other thing is that you can create, and it's hard to test. This is actually a tough scenario, because it's really hard to test and modify a list that you currently have in production, because yes, you can come in here and make changes, right? So if I go to custom forms and modify this form, oops, sorry, this is already open. So I can go in here and modify this form until I'm blue in the face, but it's not until I hit save. I can even save it, right? So let me just touch this button. So now with it detected there was a change. I can save it, right? So I can actually go in here and prep and stage my changes. But if I publish them, then everyone will be able to see it. The other thing that you can do is that if you publish it and there's an issue, there's a prod issue because you just released some new changes last night or off hours. I love this versioning capability. With the versioning capability, what it allows you to do is to go back and undo your changes, right? So with this form, we kind of butchered it a little bit in the sense that we added like this fictitious country selector for users and all that other stuff. We probably changed the logic for some of these next buttons because we wanted to show, how we would do that. So what I can do, since today is the 16th, I can go all the way back to the 8th and then say hit the ellipse and say restore. But before you do that, and this is kind of a catch-22, because in order to get to that screen, you have to hit see all versions. You have to actually close this tab. You have to actually close PowerApps Studio, or else it won't be able to restore it, because it's going to say, hey, someone has it locked out. I can't restore it. So once you close PowerApps Studio, hit restore here, you're going to go to the restore, and it shows you the live version. So the one that we restored is now 36. The live version that we're currently using, what all of our fake changes are in 34. And now the second step is to go and say publish this version, and then you're going to push that up. So that's one way, because you as of right now, until Microsoft kind of tightens up the life cycle for custom forms, you can kind of play with versions and things like that, because you are changing it real time, but you're going to make your changes off hours and all this other good stuff. But you have to, if you have to revert back, like say for example, you started to make changes, but you couldn't finish them in time before your maintenance window closed, then what you want to do is go ahead and push, revert back to the last production working version, which is what we've done here. The other thing is, now here's the difference. The difference is, if you're using a Canvas app, right, and this is the request Canvas app, these have a little bit more capabilities, in the sense that you can actually export these. You can save these off. You can import them. So you can export the package, right? And then that would kind of be like, you're saving it off, and then you can come back and then import it. But again, know that these are Canvas apps, and the requests, the look and feel are going to be a bit different than your SharePoint, the custom form in your SharePoint list, right? So we're actually going to build a Canvas app on, I'm going to go ahead and push this one up first. I'm sorry, the video, the photos one, we're going to push that one up first. So we're going to do a sample of the Canvas app on Tuesday. All right. Well, thank you all for watching. No, good question, chap. 666. You can't. That's a good question. I haven't looked at the latest PNP. I know PNP is always evolving. Let me look into that and see. Can you copy? Now, understand we're doing custom forms with PNP. Let me look into that one. I said to do. But I know, like, with the migration tool that I use, like ShareGate and stuff like that, those don't move over. So I'll take a look at it. All right. So thank you all for joining. Like I said, I'll be here every Saturday, and then I will do these quick fix. Any questions that you come up with, load me up in the comment sections. I would address those on Saturday. I will be pushing new videos that's part of the existing series on Tuesday afternoon. And then I will have these live sessions for things that I couldn't quite answer today on Tuesdays and Thursdays at 9 a.m. All right. Thank you all so much. And I'll check with you soon. Keep the conversation going in the comments section. Have a great weekend. Talk